everyone. We're coming to you live today from Bonn, Germany. This is a project of the United Planet Faith and Science Initiative, and we're brought here by the Abibiman Foundation from Ghana, Africa. My name is Stuart Scott, and I'm bringing you Climate Matters today. This is a new show that we will be airing live from the Climate Talks. I'm your host at the UN Climate Talks live in Bonn, Germany. This is my email address if anyone would like to get in touch with questions or comments. And today's topic will be fossil fuel divestment in two particular cases, the University of Hawaii and the nation of Norway. Today's guests live with me, Arvid Solheim, as well as Randy Moore, David Lassner, Joe Mobli, Chris Lee, and Lele Joy Shi, who will be with us virtually, compliments of the internet and videotaping a few days ago, to be here in Bonn. Why spend 5 plane tickets? All that carbon can be saved. Now, first, let me start with a concept to introduce you to if you don't already know. If you haven't heard of the carbon bubble, you've heard of perhaps the housing bubble, the dot-com bubble, when things get inflated in price and then they crash. It's a financial bubble. Well, we are looking at something that's being called the carbon bubble. It's a $28 trillion estimated financial bubble that is forming. First, what you're seeing there is a representation of all of the carbon dioxide from the fossil fuels burned since 1850, the date that we say the Industrial Revolution started. 1,500 gigatons of carbon dioxide. What you're looking at now is the additional 320 gigatons that have been burned in the first decade of this century. 20% as much in just 10 years. Now, what you're looking at here is an estimate of the total of owned fossil fuel reserves, 2,800 gigatons worth of carbon dioxide that is owned by governments and companies, valued in today's dollars at $28 trillion. The science tells us that for a 4 in 5 chance of avoiding runaway climate change, which would spell the decimation of humanity and life on Earth, the collapse of civilization within this century more than likely at the rates that we're going, 80% of all known fossil fuel reserves must be abandoned, left in the ground unburned as stranded assets. This is what's known as the carbon bubble. What you're seeing there is a very liberal representation of the burnable fossil fuels that we still have left. There are many scientists who say we don't have any carbon budget left to burn. These are the outside, the leftover red is agreed to be unburnable assets, and very few fossil fuel companies, if any, are publicly stating their plans to leave these carbon assets in the ground. Nations, well, that's why we're here in Bonn. We're trying to negotiate something whereby we can save humanity. Now, this is a depiction of a website that I created for the University of Hawaii about a year ago. Gave it to the student movement there, and it turned into a divestment by UH. About 2 weeks ago, an announcement was made by the University Board of Regents that the University of Hawaii would divest completely from fossil fuel stocks within 3 years. But it's more than that. Divestment is a very, very broad interest in society, because if you have money invested in any endowment, pension fund, mutual fund, if your money is being managed by others, more than likely it's being managed in fossil fuel companies. And so you also have that risk, because all fossil fuel stocks owned by fiduciaries, those who manage money for people, are likely to crash in value as this carbon bubble breaks. and those divesting early will avoid the worst of the breaking bubble. We are here trying to help break the carbon bubble. Now, in the first half of our program, we'll deal with the divestment in the University of Hawaii, and I have videos that were taken of various people in Hawaii, and this is the question that they were asked first. Why was the fossil fuel divestment campaign successful when compared with others at the University of Hawaii? The first to speak will be Randy Moore, who's chairman of the Board of Regents of the University of Hawaii.
I think what made this successful was that the students and the faculty who were involved in it took the time to visit with the individual regents and say, here's where we're going and here's why. And they provided some evidence that not only was the climate change issue important, but that the university could divest from its fossil fuel investments without damaging the portfolio diversification or the returns, the net returns.
Next, we'll hear a few words from David Lassner, who's the president of the University of Hawaii.
The conversations never took an approach of you either do exactly what we say or the world will end. There was a willingness to consider collaborative problem solving. The policy wasn't written and handed and said, please adopt this. It was a general statement about divestment, and there was the opportunity for the university and primarily the board members, but working with the administration, to figure out how to do divestment in a manner that was going to work for the University of Hawaii, as opposed to adopting a solution that was just imported from somewhere else that might have had a different investment strategy, policy, and so forth.
Now, you know, part of what we're doing today is offering tips to other universities. We're trying to help pave the way for those who are watching, for other universities to perhaps emulate the successful tactics of the University of Hawaii. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Joe Mobli, who's a professor of marine biology at UH.
There was a very formative article that I read in Chronicles of Higher Ed that was written by Donald Gould, who was trustee at Pitzer College, part of the Claremont group. And in it, he described his own experience as a trustee, Claremont College. I'm sorry, Pitzer College, rather, that it was a collaborative process with students and faculty and trustees, and that's exactly what we wanted to emulate. He said that at no point was it confrontive or adversarial. And then the homegrown part of it in Hawaii, it's all about relationships.
Relationships. He went on for a couple minutes more to describe how important that it was. The next question we put to our panel in Hawaii was, climate change has been described as the defining crisis of our time. How does fossil fuel divestment help us respond? And the first to answer, again, Randy Moore, chair of the Board of Regents.
Hawaii is unique among the 50 states. We're the only one that's 2,500 miles away from anybody else. We're not the only one, but one of the few that does not have 1 BTU worth of carbon assets underground. We have no reserves of oil, coal, gas. So everything we bring from somewhere else. I think the state pays somewhere between $5 and $7 billion a year to import energy. So the opportunity to be self-sufficient in energy is a huge economic opportunity for us. We also are the state that is probably going to be, proportion to our population, the most affected by climate change. Most of our people live within a mile of the ocean. The ocean is creeping up on us. Most of our public infrastructure is in an area that is going to be likely underwater or almost underwater in 100 years if the projections of sea level come. So there's we have the opportunity to show not only the rest of the United States, but the rest of the world how to be sustainable in every respect. And it's more than simply greenhouse gas neutral, but it's sustainable from a food supply. Most of our food is imported. Sustainability is really crucial for our well-being in the future, and we can achieve that. We can show the rest of the world how to do it. We'll have a better place.
The number shocked me. $6 or $7 billion of energy is imported to the state of Hawaii. The University of Hawaii alone has a $40 million annual electric bill, I'm told. We're not aware of what our countries and our cities spend on energy. Huge amounts of money that could be better used by benefiting social projects, healthcare. We need to change from fossil fuel, from putting that money into something that destroys the environment, into renewable energies, and go on our way. Next, we'll hear from Representative Chris Lee, who's a legislator in the state of Hawaii legislature.
I think I'll build on what Randy was really talking about. I mean, this is one step in a very, very large campaign toward moving us off of fossil fuels. And when you think about states' priorities and universities' priorities and students, our future generations' priorities, I don't think they rest with fossil fuels. And that can be summed up 100 times over, a million different ways. But here in Hawaii, I think what really helped push this along and made it successful is the fact that we are already facing the impacts of climate change. We've seen our sea level rise. We've seen our fresh water supply start to diminish. We've seen all these things start to happen that we're paying for, and the state has to, and taxpayers have to put money toward, to the tune of millions of dollars every year. We're now paying to fight the impacts of climate change. And that's something that I think really helped, because you don't have to convince people that this is something that's important, it's real, because we're facing it every day. And I think particularly at the university, which relies on support from the state, we realize that every dollar that we have to put toward fighting climate change is a dollar less that we can put toward education and toward the university. And that's something that I think is a message that a lot of students in particular really understand.
Now let's hear from Dr. Joe Mobli again.
There are two really compelling arguments for divestment. One is it has a proven track record that, from online quotes I've seen by F.W. de Klerk, who was president of South Africa during the final days of apartheid. He said that when the divestment movement kicked into high gear, he knew at that time that apartheid had to end. And then the same happened with the tobacco industry. It was divestment that really got the attention of the public about the issues with tobacco. But probably there's this group at Oxford University, analysis group on divestment, that said that really the key isn't about financially crippling the industries that are being divested from. It's about the stigmatization that happens when divestment movements start to gain momentum. So basically, it's not a war of money; it's a war of public opinion. And once tobacco is stigmatized, once apartheid, South Africa, and so on, and what we hope fossil fuels finally to get their attention, and not to remain fossil fuel companies, but become energy companies in the broad sense, and stop funding the climate denier campaigns and all that counterproductive stuff. It's time to pay attention to a very immediate problem that requires kind of a space race type mentality. We need to come around fast. We don't have the benefit of decades of time. So to me, that's the real power of divestment.
Joe really hit it on the head. We really need a space race mentality. We have to change very fast what we're doing. And old habits die hard, but we must change our old habits. Next, the last question we asked of this panel was, what kind of effect do you hope that divestment by the University of Hawaii will have?
Well, hopefully it sends a message to other universities that it is possible. Not only to universities, but to other entities that hold endowments, foundations, trust funds, state pension funds. This is a message that it is absolutely possible to divest without compromising your investment returns, without compromising your asset diversity of of what you invest in.
And again, David Lassner, president of UH.
And I think there's every institution that adopts a divestment policy helps make it easier for the next one, because people, as we looked at what the universities before us had done, others will look at ours. And I think the report from our task force involving students, faculty, administrators, and led by our board leadership really laid out that it's a little bit hard right now, but the statement of intent to divest moving forward is part of what will create additional options. And in fact, I shared with our board leadership this morning, as a result of this divestment, this morning I had in my email a pitch from a fund that is a new fossil-free fund that didn't exist probably when we were reviewing this policy. And the more of those fossil-free funds that are out there, there will be increasing competition, lower fees, increasing returns, and we'll have more choice as we do now today with funds that include fossil fuels.
Things are changing. That's the hopeful message. Now we'll hear from Lele Joy Shi, and I owe her a very special vote of thanks because she helped put the press conference in Hawaii together for us.
We are actually the largest public university to divest from fossil fuels at this time. Across our 10 campuses, we have almost 58,000 students. And what this says is that we really are stewards of the environment. We really are a progressive university. We're sending a strong message, not just to the state. The University of Hawaii is a big part of our community, but to the rest of the country, being the largest public university to have divested.
Again, thank you, Lele. Finally, I'll give the floor to Rep. Lee for one more time.
Sure. I think this year in particular, with divestment of the university, with our state's goals moving toward 100% renewable by 2045, and a huge number of other things that have made us not only national leaders here on renewable energy, but national leaders on dealing with the effects of climate change that we're facing now more than ever here in Hawaii, with our rising seas and our diminishing rainfall and greater invasive species and the loss of our reefs and everything else that is impacting not only us locally and culturally, but our economy and the viability of our tourism industry and the viability in the future of people's jobs here in the state. And I think what we've seen here with this suite of policy changes, both at the university, at the state level, this is probably the single biggest year, not only for our state, but for our country in moving toward a renewable and cleaner future that's going to help mitigate the effects of climate change on us all.
One of the things he was referring to obliquely was that the state of Hawaii, a couple of weeks ago, passed a 100% renewable energy mandate by 2045. It's in law. The state of Hawaii will be run on completely renewable energy by 2045. Now, we'll come back to the live part of our presentation, our show here, and I want to introduce Arvid Solheim, who's from the Norwegian Forum for Development and Environment. And he, in particular, will be speaking with us about the coal divestment by the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And we are in a period now where the parties have agreed and the vote has not yet been taken, but the expectation is there will be a pretty close to unanimous vote on Friday of this week. Arvid?
Yes, this is really a great victory for all the good forces who have been fighting for this withdrawal for many years. It started with a demand from civil society, church groups, and others that this enormous pension fund, which is actually, I think it is the world's biggest sovereign wealth fund. It's about $1 trillion, close to $1 trillion. That's a lot of money. That the management of this fund should not be aiming only at increasing output and value. It should also be based upon solid ethical and environmental guidelines. It should be also to the benefit of all of humanity, not only my pensions and my father's pensions and my children's pensions. So that's where it all came from. And then and of course it has received a lot of resistance from governments over the years. But now finally, with some changes in the composition of the parliament, and as a result of our pressure, now at least the fund will receive instructions to divest from coal or to start a dialogue with companies. The devil is in the details, and the decision is that companies that have more than 30% of their income or 30% of their activities in coal production or energy production from coal, shall start a dialogue and say that, hey, you should get out of this coal business or we will sell our shares. It's not going to happen immediately. There will be a dialogue, but within a limited amount of years, they will have to get out of that company if they don't change their behavior. So the idea is to create some kind of movement within the industry as well.
I think the word movement is very important there. Even if the divestment won't happen immediately, the ball is beginning to roll, or as we say in the United States, the train is leaving the station. And once that happens, especially with a sovereign wealth fund of $1 trillion in size, eyebrows will be raised on Wall Street around the world. Now, I've been told that the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund actually owns from 1% to 2% of all the stocks on Earth. If you put them all in a basket, the NWSF owns, I got the letters wrong, I'm sorry, owns 1% to 2% of that basket. That's a huge amount. That's huge influence. Now, what do you think the impact will be of the announced divestment?
Well, as you said, the government pension fund Global, which is the official name, is invested in more than 9,300 companies. So it's in all stock markets, basically in the world. It will be a strong signal to all these companies, and as well as to regulators, to governments, business leaders, investors, that, hey, this is a sunset industry. Fossil industry is not where we are going to make our money in the future, so we better get out soon. And it will be a strong signal to companies who are in this business that we should look for other sources, other areas to invest our money, and start getting into, well, whatever they want, renewables or making something useful, that's fine, but at least getting out of the fossil industry. So, and it will also selling this, it's not such a massive amount. I think it's about 500 million kroners. That's maybe $100 million in the first, this 30%.
I'll take it.
Yeah. It will have some influence on share prices also. Even if, of course, those parties who have been opposing this, they have always said that, oh, if we sell, then somebody will buy, so they will make the profit. But this is it's a
false logic.
It's a false logic, and it is a signal, and it will have some impact, and it's starting a trend that is going to continue. And investors, they are very, how should I say, they are very picky about where they put their money. They want to make sure that they are not losing.
I want to deal with that false logic for a moment. I was a stockbroker on Wall Street for a couple of years back in the mid-1970s, and I make claim to have been the first environmentalist stockbroker back when people would say, "You're what?" And I worked for Merrill Lynch, but Merrill Lynch was too big to support that specialty. The companies were too small at the time, so I left. But it's false logic to say that if a large amount of money is divested, is sold, and the stigmatization occurs, oh, somebody else will buy my stock. Well, the person buying that stock is going to think twice. And when I was on Wall Street, we liked to say that the stock market is like a herd of sheep. sometimes being led to a jubilation and sometimes being led to slaughter. And there's a very narrow gate for those sheep to go through. And when the stampede starts to occur, the prices on stocks tend to drop quickly. So a divestment by the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund may affect the price that people selling their stock will get for it. May. Something that big. By the way, this is the thank you that the collective website of 350.org and of VAS and WWF and Framtiden in Norway. A number of large NGOs got together and did a website also urging the Norway to divest from fossil fuels. This was there. Now let me ask you, why this year was it successful? I know this has been tried for a few years, and again, what lessons can we learn on how to make fossil fuel divestment happen?
Well, the whole pressure built up over years, right? And the fund has been growing also. So it's became more and more important for us for us as Norwegians, so to say, not to be part owners of a fund which is heavily invested in such an industry which is damaging the climate of the planet. So we have increasingly become aware that this is important. There has been sign-on campaigns. There have been these websites, international friends and associates and organizations and church groups and others have also sent petitions to the Norwegian government saying that this is important. So it's like growing over the years. The original demand was always to pull out of the entire fossil sector, including petroleum, oil and gas and coal.
And tar sands.
And
fracking.
Well, all of that. Fossils. The change in the whole development here was that we had an election 2 years ago when the coalition led by the Labour Party, who had been in power for 8 years, they lost. Now there is a more conservative government, which is in principle less interested in divestment, as being more from the business side of society. But then Labour Party, as the main opposition party and a big party with more than 25% of the votes in the country, suddenly found themselves in opposition. They needed to have some strong issues where they could show themselves as progressive, future-oriented, creative, because they were known to be fairly boring as they had been in power for 8 years. So they needed something new. So they took up a number of issues, among this divestment from coal. They didn't want to go all the way for fossils, as we have a big Norwegian oil industry, so that would be a little bit too radical at this point. But coal doesn't really damage much of Norwegian interests in Norway, so that was a fairly easy thing to do. They didn't lose out too much of their friendships with Norwegian oil companies or international oil companies. For that
Friendships. The Norwegian government owns, is it 60% of the state oil company?
Yeah, 64% of Statoil, yes.
Well, there's still a ways to go in Norway. One of my first involvements, and by the way, Can International will not be doing their press conference today, so they've given us a few minutes of their time, so we won't be cut off at 10:30 sharp. But one of the first things I heard when I got involved with this issue of divestment in Norway was that there was a debate going on in Norwegian society because people were waking up to the fact that many of the beneficiaries of this government pension fund would not live out their normal years because of the damage that the fossil fuels were doing to their future. And so society had to wrestle with this. How do we justify socking away money now when our children who are supposed to benefit from that money may not live a good life because of it. So yes, Norway, along with many others who own fossil fuel reserves, need to come to grips with the fact that most of it needs to be left in the ground. Again, Statoil needs to become Statren. Ren is the
Clean.
I'm sorry?
Clean.
It means clean.
Clean energy.
Yeah, I showed Arvid a little gimmick that I'd done changing Statoil to Statren, and he said, "You didn't know this, but Ren means clean." So the Norwegian oil company, Norway, needs to go into clean energy. The Saudis need to. We all need to be looking at changing the fossil fuel companies to energy companies, renewable energy companies. Now, I think we have run over slightly in our time, so I'd like to thank you all for coming, and thank you all for watching. This is my address again, my email address for anyone who might have comments. And I want to send special thanks to Scotty Wong, who did the videotaping in Hawaii for us. I want to thank all of you for watching. I want to thank you for caring and for doing all that you can. And the one request I have to follow on is if you want to get more involved, please go to rebootworld.org and click on Sign Up. Thank you very much.